Oh boy, you guys, America just launched a massive crackdown against the cartel, not just at the border, but deep into the interior of the country in states you'd never expect. The front line has moved far north, with thousands of agents conducting arrests across Colorado, Utah, and even as far as heck in Montana, where fentanyl seizures have surged by 50%.
ICE conducted a multi-location enforcement operation in the Denver area.
We're also seeing this crackdown across state lines. In Houston, FBI agents confirmed they caught 2 suspected TDA associates with drugs and a gun this morning.
But now, federal agents are turning the turntables, hunting gangs like Tren de Aragua and MS-13 under a series of new, powerful sets of authorities that have been granted to them. Take a look at Executive Order 14157. Section 2 of it states, "It is the policy of the United States to ensure the total elimination of these organizations' presence in and their ability to threaten the territory." The key phrase there is totally eliminate. I saw those words used again and again throughout multiple different federal directives that I looked at. If you slam Control F on the keyboard, totally eliminate shows up 8 times in this 5-page document from the Attorney General. This aggressive, just savage new mandate, I think, signals a major shift from containment to full-scale eradication of the cartel on U.S. soil. The U.S. government is trying to basically 100% complete this drug war after they've already been playing it for the past 4 decades. But what new tactics are they using? How is the cartel responding to all this? And what extreme lengths are authorities willing to go? I'm your everyday infantryman, Chris Cappy. Let's find out. Piecing together this story wasn't easy because there were so many different sources I had to go through that had their own agenda. When I launched this new channel, I knew I had to work with Ground News because their platform is the best way for my team and I to stay objective with our reporting. Ground News is an app and a website that gathers all this news from all over the world and it puts it in one place, which has made researching these videos for me 1,000 times easier. Like this story, for example, about the Trump administration considering using drone strikes against Mexican drug cartels. It's a topic that mixes national security, international law, and foreign policy, so I have the context I need from multiple sides to know the full story. Thanks to Ground News, I can easily sort by political bias, location, or even government affiliation to break down this complex issue. It shows me that out of over 100+ outlets reporting on this story, 55% of them are high in factuality. The left-leaning outlet Latin Times quoted a former DEA agent who warned drone strikes would turn into another Vietnam. At the same time, the American Military News, an outlet that leans right, focused on how the cartel is already using drones to spy on U.S. troops at the border. We're offering 40% off the same Vantage plan that we use here on my team. Just click the link in the description or go to ground.news/Cappy or scan this QR code. That's ground.news/Cappy for one of the biggest discounts that they've ever offered. They knocked the price down to only $5 a month. Give Ground News a shot. It's the best time to do so. You're getting a better understanding of the world and supporting the work that we do here at the same time. But what new methods are they using now that the name of the game is total elimination? First, they've given the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA, what's called Title VIII authority. What that means is they're now required to involve ICE when encountering individuals suspected of being in the country illegally, because Title VIII authority is part of an effort to deport gangs like Tren de Aragua, Jalisco, and Sinaloa cartels that are major targets. These new authorities, of course, have pros and cons. I'm outside the ICE detention center in Newark, New Jersey. They just recently overfilled with too many prisoners.
We're following breaking news out of Newark, where faith leaders have blocked the entrance to Delaney Hall, which is the ICE facility.
So far in 2025, ICE has arrested 65,000 illegal immigrants with what they say are criminal records and thousands of cartel members.
And that's the problem that they're running into, is that they're running out of space in the prison. So they're sending them places to like Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay. They're sending them to El Salvador.
The U.S. government just ordered ICE to expand by 20,000 agents, which would double its current size. New budget outlines show massive increases in spending for them. You might be surprised to learn, ICE has an $8 billion annual budget. Compared to the DEA's is less than half of that.
And that's part of the reason why ICE has such a giant budget, is because they also run their own prisons.
This is the first detention center opened up under the new administration with 1,000 beds here. The reason why it's so important to their plan is because it's located close to the airport and they're hoping to deport people straight from here. Then, the U.S. government invoked the Aliens Enemy Act, which allowed them to fast-track these deportations to mega jails in El Salvador. Do not pass go, do not collect $200, straight to jail. This is because by February 2025, ICE detention centers had already reached full capacity in the United States.
Tren de Aragua, which President Trump labeled an invading force on Saturday when he invoked the Alien Enemies Act. Hours later, he sent hundreds of migrants on deportation flights to El Salvador, including what the Trump administration alleges is 250 members of Tren de Aragua.
The U.S. government has set an ambitious goal of deporting 1 million immigrants each year. So why is the cartel taking this risk, trying to get drugs deeper and deeper into the American heartland? Take a look at this map here. It shows the 33 different high-intensity drug trafficking areas called HIDTA for short. What is a HIDTA? HIDTAs are regions in the United States that have been designated by the federal government as a serious drug trafficking threat. They get extra federal funding to coordinate different law enforcement efforts, so bringing together local police, sheriffs, the DEA, FBI, and even in some cases the National Guard and local tribal leaders. You likely live next to one of these HIDTA trafficking corridors without even knowing it. I know I do. I live in New Jersey, right along the I-95 trafficking route that connects the Newark airport and the New Jersey port system all together to New York City. It's just a drug trafficking dream come true for them. The cartels use these highways to transport illicit substances. From the Mexican border, for instance, to Montana. It's a long 1,300 mile or about a 2-day drive if you haul ass. It's risky for them to stay on that road that long, but fentanyl sells for 20 times the price in Montana than it does in Texas. Margins like that mean that you're looking at some of the most profitable smuggling routes in the entire world. Essentially, demand in these isolated towns is much higher than in the big cities, where there's more competition from rival gangs. The U.S. Attorney for Montana, Jesse Losovich, said, "People are surprised. You're as far north as you can get in the United States, and yet we have the cartels here. When drugs get to their destination, their end result, the gangs spreading this deep into the country, there's an estimated 450,000 Americans who've died from opioid overdoses in the last decade, so we know what's at stake here." Lovely old Colorado Springs has become an unlikely flashpoint because it lies along I-25, which is a crucial north-south corridor that connects Mexico to the United States and Canada. Like many of these locations we're talking about today, it's one of the most naturally beautiful cities in the American West, often described as where the plains meet the Rockies. The DEA conducted a massive raid on an illegal nightclub in the city. It led to the arrest of people with drugs tied to the Sinaloa cartel. They're discovering something counterintuitive in the interior of America. Special agent in charge of the DEA Rocky Mountain Division, Jonathan Pullen, said, quote, "I actually thought we would seize less. I thought with the border being tighter, we'd see smaller seizures. I was wrong. We have seized so much fentanyl this year. We think there may be some stockpiling happening on the U.S. side from the Mexican cartels, and that's why we're seeing such large amounts right now." To better understand this new nationwide crackdown, I spoke with former DEA agent Chris Feisel, who was stationed in Miami in the 1980s. He fought against the cartel there. He was stationed in Colombia and investigated the Cali cartel. Chris was even portrayed in the show Narcos.
As demand increases, obviously you're going to have more supply. Drug trafficking organizations are constantly changing, right? They're constantly probing. They're looking for weaknesses. They're looking for ways to circumvent. They've learned from the best, man. They'll get copies of the indictment. They'll see what happened in court.
Authorities first established the HIDTA program in 1988, and originally it was just the border states. In 1996, the government added the Rocky Mountain HIDTA division as the drug problem stretched further inland. This is where the interdiction teams get to work. And by interdiction, that basically means to disrupt, destroy, capture, or essentially cut off the cartel's capability to successfully operate. This is one of the main routes deeper into Middle America here. Patrolling this highway is Collin County Sheriff Jim Skinner. He said this is extraordinarily dangerous work. We've seen the cartels working in ways we've never seen before. And to that point, one of his deputies stopped the subject who was carrying 14 kilos of cocaine on the highway. Instead of being captured alive, the drug runner pulled out his pistol and started firing at the deputy. A full-on firefight broke out. The officer returned fire and killed the gang member. He narrowly avoided being killed himself. His bulletproof vest and gun holster were hit by return fire from the cartel member. So why do these cartel smugglers choose to shoot it out with authorities instead of being arrested?
Some of these people we've talked to, they think that they're getting ripped off, right? Things are happening so fast. When it comes time to take these people down, these guys panic. They think they're getting ripped off. Some of them are worried that if they lose the product, they're going to be responsible for it, and they're going to be on the hook, with the drug trafficking organization.
To understand that better, I read a first-hand account titled Interceptors, The Untold Fight Against the Mexican Cartels, written by Matthew Thomas, who was on a SWAT interdiction team for 2 decades, tasked with finding cartel smugglers in the border state of Arizona. According to him, today's sicarios publicly execute not only their enemies, but also one another for failures. They cut off their own cartel members' heads and then hang the corpses from an overpass for all to see. Naturally, some of these smugglers fear reprisals for losing a massive haul of drugs that are worth millions of dollars, so they decide it's better to go down fighting than end up at the mercy of the gang leadership. They've seized over 40,000 firearms throughout Hidta, which is an indication of the amount of armed traffickers that they face on the highways. Matthew Thomas, the former SWAT officer in Arizona, explains how interdiction is a lot different in the vast, open borders than on the choke points of the highways. So there are 6 ports at the international border in Arizona where there are hundreds of miles of open, remote desert. Once the cartel reaches a major city through Interstate 8, they hide their product in local houses that the cartel owns. Then they're transferred by another vehicle to a major city like Phoenix to what are called trap houses, where the product is distributed.
That when we would raid some of these stash houses where they were storing large amounts of money or cocaine, we would find these manuals, and it was basically entitled How to Run and Maintain a Stash House. And when you go through this manual, and it was very thick, it was like a corporate manual that, when you go to work at IBM, they give you, okay, these are the rules and the policies. No loud parties. Cut your grass. Talk to your neighbors every day. Don't drive a flashy car. The stash houses were all rented, so if the DEA came and did a search warrant and seized the house, you couldn't seize it because you'd have to give it back to the rightful owner.
That's so creepy that they have like these lists of how to be a normal human and not appear like you're selling thousands of dollars of drugs in the suburbs. Here, interdiction is a reconnaissance mission. Thomas and his team were armed with M4s, night vision goggles, body armor, and often so are the cartel. The cartels even have scouts that are positioned on high ground throughout the Arizona valleys and plateaus. The SWAT teams have their own long-range observation outposts that coordinate with helicopters and drones with thermal vision overhead. They look for suspicious vehicles coming up from the Mexican border, and once they find the smugglers, they interdict them by throwing flashbangs that are extremely loud and noisy, and then they use that distraction to arrest them. Something that surprised me was that cartels even run logistics like a paramilitary force. Resupply vehicles go through Arizona's desert roads like battlefield convoys. Inside these cartel resupply Logi trucks, they're stocked full of black duffel bags that are loaded with everything an operative might need for days off the grid. Food, batteries, alcohol, smokes, burner phones, radios, camping gear, fresh clothes, and of course, weapons and ammunition. These vehicles stop at key waypoints that are along the smuggling corridors, and they drop off care packages like Narco Amazon Prime for the cartel members that are going to be going through there later. And here's where it gets maddening. For years, law enforcement would catch these drivers red-handed that were driving these logistics trucks, but they couldn't do much about it because technically they weren't committing a clear crime. They weren't holding drugs, they weren't crossing the border illegally, they were just dropping bags off in the desert like one does on a Tuesday afternoon. But these guys, they're the lifeblood of the smuggling operations. Prosecutors felt that they didn't have enough to go after them, though. So most got deported, no charges, no jail, just rinse and repeat. They'd be back later that year. But now, everything's shifting. Federal authorities are changing tactics. They're going after the supply chains themselves. That means hammering down on the logistics networks, the drop points, the runners, the scouts. not just the kingpins and the coyotes. And that's where the term interior enforcement comes up. It starts popping up all over with interdiction. I noticed this buzzword of interior arrests, interior enforcement. It shows up in DHS reports and press briefings. Law enforcement is pushing deeper into the interior of the country, into states like Utah, Colorado, and Montana that we've been talking about. If you want proof of any of this, look no further than what just happened on Friday, May 16th, 2025. The Department of Homeland Security officially requested 20,000 Army National Guard soldiers, not for a foreign war, but for immigration enforcement right here at home. And they're not just reinforcing the border, they're going national. Border Patrol agents, which full on have the word border in their name, are being pulled off the line in places like El Paso and being reassigned into cities and suburbs across America. It's a massive operational pivot to the heartland. But why? Because interior arrests are way harder than catching someone climbing over a fence. It takes more intelligence, more time, more bodies, more sources, and more manpower to conduct an interior operation. But ICE isn't the only federal agency getting new marching orders. Other parts of the national security apparatus are shifting focus too. The CIA, for example, is quietly stepping up its role in the drug war. According to a Washington Post article, they reported that the CIA Director John Ratcliffe is evaluating plans to share more intelligence with regional governments, train local narcotics units, and possibly conduct other covert actions. From where I am, increasingly it looks like the U.S. government is waging counter-terrorism style operations inside their own borders against these gangs. And that's what you hear when you read all of these agencies talking about their contributions. They say, hey, we learned a lot when we were in Iraq and Afghanistan. Why don't we use it against the cartels now? It's fascinating to see these comparisons. Or reading through police documents, as one does on a normal Tuesday, I saw that the HIDTA system on the map makes everything clear. Or maybe that's just me because maps, they're very consistent to me. The natural geography is the only thing that makes sense in my life anymore. I can see how America's drug epidemic has spread like cancer that has metastasized along the lifeblood of the nation's economy. The highway, the arteries of my country. Over $18 trillion worth of goods are transported through the United States highways and railroads each year. Just a mind-boggling scale. The U.S. interstate itself, that highway system, is insane. It spans 48,000 miles long, making it one of the longest continuous highway networks in the entire world. And us Americans, we love our vehicles, and hating public transit is maybe the one single thing we can all agree on at this point. Nothing brings people together more than mutual hate. According to the DEA report, thousands of products are commingled with legitimate trade goods along tractor trailers and along these routes that we're just talking about. These commercial routes are the perfect camouflage. And once the drugs are deep inland in the American deep heartland, they fracture and infect smaller cities and rural towns, overwhelming local law enforcement. Stephen Crawford, for instance, the chief of the Narcotics Bureau for the Montana Division, said virtually 100% of the methamphetamine and fentanyl that we get comes from Mexico. When I get the question, how much of that is cartel related? All of it. Evidence of this comes from this court document that I dug up for the arrest of a man named Ricardo Ramos Medina. He's a Sinaloa-affiliated smuggler. And these documents reveal that Medina regularly transported narcotics along a route through San Diego to a distribution network in Montana. This is until he was caught in March 2020 in the single largest drug bust in the history of the state. They found 2 pounds of pure meth, more than enough to keep an entire town of people sky high for days. Investigators arrested a number of others associated with the cartel smuggling network, but they had already brought hundreds of thousands of fentanyl pills into the countryside. But how is the cartel responding to all of this new government tomfoolery against them? The New York Times released an article by journalists Natalie Ketroff and Paulina Vallejos, where they're actually in Mexico right now, and they had the balls to speak to actual cartel leadership. A high-ranking member of the Sinaloa cartel told them, "You can't be calm, you can't even sleep, because you don't know when they'll catch you. The most important thing now is to survive," end quote. That's from a cartel member saying that. And to me, that sounds like fear, at least for this moment. I mean, who wouldn't be afraid of a missile from America being sent right to your teeth?
Each organization learns from the prior cartel's mistakes, right? The Cali cartel learned a great deal from Medellin. You know, the Medellin cartel they declared war on the government. They were assassinating, presidential candidates, the Minister of Justice, judges, attacking the POWs, blowing up the Avianca flight, right? So the Cali cartel said, you know what, we don't want any of that. We don't want that heat. We don't want that pressure. We're just going to be much more low key. And instead of killing officials, we're going to bribe officials, right? We're going to pay everybody to get them on our side.
According to them, a cartel leader is planning on how to avoid American military strikes by rarely leaving his home and shutting down most of his drug labs that he's in control of, which sounds very similar to my life. I rarely ever leave my home either. This follows a massive crackdown by Mexican authorities across the border, where they just sent dozens of cartel operatives to face justice in the United States. It's being called a clear sign from our partners in the South that they have an appetite to bring the fight to the cartels. The cartel response so far has been to sell off property and fire unessential personnel. They're doing this to try to make up for lost income from losses of fentanyl trade that have happened recently. Other cartel members at times interviewed said that they were investing money in advanced equipment to detect American government drones. Instead of retaliation that many feared, it appears like the cartel are sticking their heads in the sand and they're going to try to wait this out, a la what the Taliban did, I guess. They're just trying to lay low while things are this hot. But there's always two sides to every sword. Cracking down on the cartels that we all can agree we hate isn't without its consequences. There are reports of families with children who are U.S. citizens being deported. Mistakes are being made with these deportations.
President Trump's immigration crackdown is intensifying. The White House says it's considering suspending habeas corpus. That's the constitutional right, allowing people to challenge their detention in court.
So, however, 62% of Americans believe and support the mass deportations. Even 53% of the Hispanic population favors these deportations. If I had to guess, it's because their communities are hit the hardest by these criminal elements. Who else is going to want to fully eliminate the cartels than the Hispanic population whose brothers, fathers, whose families are being threatened by the gangs the most? Interdiction can't just be physically chasing down every cartel member, though. In order to go for total elimination, you need to go after their money, and that's where Operation Cash Out comes in. It's a new DEA operation. It's a strategy that revolves around close cooperation with hundreds of banks in the Rocky Mountain region. I'll say this, now that I've started my own business, I've seen how this works. My bank has asked me maybe a dozen times if I'm an international drug dealer because I have someone who works for me in Colombia that I wire money to. But it's like they always say, follow the money, because DEA agents tracked a coke deal in Memphis to Chinese gangster named Shiji Lee. This led to a network of couriers in Chicago's Chinatown. Lee recruited immigrants who didn't speak much English, so they'd be harder to identify. The multi-year investigation of Lee and his money laundering network led to disturbing links between the Sinaloa cartel and members of the Chinese Communist Party. Two strange bedfellows, I must say. Former FBI counterintelligence specialist Frank Montoya said, quote, "We suspected a Chinese ideological and strategic motivation behind the drug and money activity to fan the flames of hate and division. The Chinese have seen the advantages of the drug trade. If fentanyl helps them and hurts this country, why not?" According to the DEA, Chinese money is the #1 underwriter of transnational criminal organizations. But in order to stop the cartel from destroying the heartland of America, hard power has to be combined with soft power. The one thing these interdiction teams cannot combat is America's seemingly unquenchable thirst for illegal substances. The officers do their part to stop the supply, but many of them, I've read their testimonials, and they openly acknowledge that departments also need to do extensive education on the dangers of substances, and more resources need to be put into improving mental health for those struggling with addiction. If we want to, quote-unquote, fully eliminate these criminal gangs, we're going to also need to look in the mirror and change our drug demand to reduce that supply. As much as the cartels seem to be on a rising tide all around, the combined efforts of law enforcement across the 4 states of the Rocky Mountain are having an effect. Rocky Mountain HITSA seized a combined 3 million pills of fentanyl, more than ever before. What this all amounts to is the United States is no longer just playing defense. It's going on offense from the Rocky Mountains to the Midwest, hunting the cartels, intercepting carriers, and tracking stash houses. It's part of a coordinated effort with ICE that has accelerated deportations and seen the DEA embedding deeper into HITSA zones. Will they be able to fully eliminate the cartel? And at what cost would that mean to taxpayers and in blood? It appears we're going to find out. Thank you guys for watching. First merch drop, the Total Elimination Cartel t-shirt, available for a limited time. Go to cappyarmy.com, hit merch to get yours today. Be sure to check out Chris Feisel's new book that's coming out soon, After Escobar. There's going to be a link in the descriptions.